Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that the reason she's been undervalued, underestimated, or taken for granted isn't because she isn't enough, but because she's been giving too much of herself to the wrong people. Today, I'm going to reveal the 5 things a woman must keep private, because the moment you guard these parts of your life, everything changes. Men treat you differently, your presence hits differently, your energy becomes undeniable, and the respect you've always deserved finally becomes the standard you attract. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you carry yourself for the rest of your life. There's a quiet power inside every woman, a power that becomes unshakable when she understands that not everything about her life, her heart, or her journey deserves an audience. In a world where oversharing is celebrated, privacy becomes a form of self-respect, and the moment you truly embrace that, you stop seeking validation and start building value. Because the truth is, not every man deserves access to your inner world. Not every man has earned the privilege of knowing the parts of you that make you who you are. Some things are meant to be protected, not as secrets, but as boundaries that guard your peace, your dignity, and your standards. When a woman knows what to keep private, she shifts the balance of power. Her energy becomes magnetic. She becomes someone a man can admire, not someone he feels entitled to dissect or evaluate. Privacy isn't about hiding, it's about choosing. Choosing what to share, when to share it, and with whom. And that choice, when used wisely, makes you stronger, not colder. It makes you mysterious, not distant. It makes you valuable, not vulnerable. The first thing you must protect is the depth of your past pain. You may share parts of it with a man who proves himself trustworthy, but the rawest pieces, the wounds that shaped you, should not be handed over too quickly. When a woman unloads her entire emotional history onto a man early on, she turns vulnerability into exposure, and exposure without trust can be dangerous. Not because men will always misuse that information, but because you give someone emotional access they haven't yet earned. Your past pain is not an introduction, it's a privilege. The strength you forged through those struggles is what he should meet first. The details come later when his character has shown that he can hold them with care. The second thing you must keep private is the degree of your insecurities. Every human being has doubts, fears, and weak spots. But when a woman broadcasts her insecurities, she unintentionally teaches a man how to treat her. She shows him where she questions her worth. A man should discover your confidence before he ever encounters your self-doubt. When you lead with insecurity, you create a dynamic where he feels above you, even if he doesn't mean to. But when you lead with self-assurance, you create a dynamic where he sees you as someone he must show up for with integrity, effort, and respect. Your insecurities belong to the parts of your life where love, safety, and consistency have been established, not to someone still proving they deserve a place in your world. The third thing you must guard is the full story of your financial life. Whether you're struggling or thriving, your financial reality is not something a man should know early in a connection. When a woman reveals too much about her finances, it can create assumptions, expectations, or power imbalances that shift the entire relationship dynamic. Your goals, your ambitions, your standards, those are worth sharing. But the exact numbers, the exact debts, the savings, the income, they belong in a chapter much later. A man should be attracted to your mindset, not your money. He should be drawn to your independence, not your resources. And when the time comes to merge futures or build something together, you share the details from a place of mutual trust, not premature vulnerability. The fourth thing to keep private is the intimacy of your friendships and personal relationships. The inner conversations you have with your closest people, their opinions, the drama, the conflicts, the secrets, they are not for a man to dissect or judge. The moment you start exposing the flaws of the people you love, you create cracks in the foundation of your own support system. And more than that, you give a man the power to form opinions about individuals who are part of your emotional backbone. A strong woman knows how to maintain emotional loyalty. She can seek advice without betraying trust. She can express a need without throwing her friends under the bus. Your relationships outside of him are sacred. They are the soil that keeps you grounded. Protect them. The fifth thing a woman must keep private is her long-term emotional blueprint. A man does not need to know every detail of what you envision for the next 10 years. How many kids you want, what age you want them, the size of the house, the timeline of every step. When you reveal this too soon, you unintentionally put pressure on the connection. He begins to wonder if he is being evaluated for a role he never auditioned for. Instead, let your standards be clear, but your plans be personal. Show that you know your value, that you know what you deserve, that you know how to walk away from anything that doesn't match your worth. But the specific script of your future stays with you until he has proven through action, consistency, and intention that he genuinely wants to be part of that story. When a woman protects these 5 areas of her life, something powerful happens. She becomes someone a man has to rise to meet, someone he must earn, someone he must respect. Privacy builds value because it shows that you are not desperate to be understood. You are selective. You are not eager to impress. You are patient. You are not intimidated by walking alone. You are confident enough to wait for the right partnership. A woman's power multiplies when she stops giving every man access to her emotional vault, when she learns that privacy is not coldness but wisdom, when she understands that the right man does not need instant access to everything. He needs time, effort, and presence to earn it. And a woman who lives by that truth never struggles to be valued because she never throws her value onto a table for free. Your mystery becomes magnetic. Your boundaries become beautiful. Your silence becomes strength. And your presence becomes something a man must work to keep, not something he assumes he can have without effort. When you protect your inner world, you force a man to show his intentions. You force him to reveal whether he is truly committed or just curious. And you give yourself the space to observe, evaluate, and choose. Not from fear, not from loneliness, but from power. Because a woman who understands the value of privacy becomes a woman who no longer begs to be valued. She becomes a woman who naturally attracts respect. And that is where your true strength begins. And when you begin to understand this, you'll notice something remarkable in the way men respond to you. A man who once felt entitled to your openness now finds himself leaning in, curious, drawn, and unexpectedly respectful. Not because you are playing a game, but because you have elevated the value of your energy. You have become a woman who no longer reveals herself to earn affection, but one who reveals herself only when affection has already been earned. That distinction alone transforms everything. It changes the way you speak, the way you move, the way you connect, the way you choose, and the way you walk away when necessary. When you hold your inner world with care, you create a presence that feels grounded and self-assured. Men notice this immediately. There is something undeniably compelling about a woman who doesn't rush to fill silence with stories about her scars, who doesn't unpack her whole life the moment someone shows interest. She is someone who listens, observes, and chooses, who gets to step deeper into her world. This presence communicates strength without needing to declare it. It says you know who you are. It says you are not afraid to be alone. It says you don't need a man to validate your identity. You simply desire a man who is worthy of experiencing it. And when a woman operates from that level of self-respect, she stops being afraid of losing someone. Instead, she begins to focus on whether they deserve to stay. That shift in perspective is where real confidence begins. Because when you know that you are not giving away the most intimate pieces of your life prematurely, you stop worrying about whether someone will leave after hearing your story. Stop trying to impress with honesty that hasn't yet been earned. You stop performing vulnerability in hopes of connection. You begin to understand that your truth deserves a safe place to land, not an early exit in someone's casual curiosity. A man who senses this will show you something important about himself. He will either rise to the level of maturity required to be in your space, or he will retreat because he cannot meet that standard. And either outcome is a gift. The first shows you someone capable of depth, responsibility, and emotional respect. The second reveals someone who was never meant to access your heart in the first place. Privacy protects you from confusion, from disappointment, and from investing in the wrong person too soon. Because the reality is, many men fall in love with the version of a woman they meet at the beginning before they know her layers. But a truly committed man falls in love with the woman he gets to discover. He values the unfolding. He appreciates the depth that isn't immediately revealed. And when you give him the responsibility of earning your trust gradually, you create a dynamic in which he feels honored, not overwhelmed. You give him room to show intention, not just interest. You give him the chance to demonstrate consistency, not just curiosity. Men value what they invest in. They value what they work for. They value what they pursue with purpose. When you withhold the most tender parts of yourself until he shows commitment through action, you create a bond built on respect, not convenience. Your strength becomes a filter. The wrong men fall away. The right man steps forward with clarity. And it's not just about romance. This is about your identity. It's about what you believe you deserve. Because the moment you begin guarding those 5 areas of your life, you start shaping a version of yourself that is disciplined with her emotional energy. You begin to make decisions not out of fear, but out of self-worth. You begin to recognize that not everyone you meet will understand you, but that has nothing to do with your value. You stop explaining yourself to those who aren't invested in truly knowing you. You stop bleeding emotionally for people who haven't even offered you a bandage. You start noticing your own patterns. You start seeing where you once gave too much. You start remembering times when you shared your pain with someone who wasn't ready to carry any of it. You remember moments you revealed your insecurities to someone who later used them against you. You recall times when you were open about your finances and suddenly noticed a shift in how you were treated. You think back to when you exposed the intimate details of your friendships only to regret the ripple effect it created, and you remember the relationships that cracked under the pressure of sharing a future plan with someone who was never meant to be in it. But something changes when you learn from those moments. You stop being ashamed of them and start being shaped by them. You stop blaming yourself and start building yourself. Because every time you gave too much too soon, you were not weak, you were hopeful, you were not foolish, you were trusting. And hope and trust are beautiful qualities when placed in the hands of someone capable of honoring them. Now, your hope becomes wiser, your trust becomes slower, your heart becomes more discerning, not hardened. You understand that intimacy is not measured by how quickly you open up, but by how intentionally you do. You begin to appreciate the quiet power in saying, "I'll share that when it feels right." You start enjoying the confidence that comes from pacing yourself emotionally. You learn the difference between being private and being guarded. One protects your peace, the other imprisons it. And when you embrace privacy with purpose, you free yourself from the need to rush, to impress, or to prove. The right man will admire this. He will see your emotional discipline not as distance, but as depth. He will recognize that a woman who respects herself inspires respect from others. He will understand that you are not withholding to play hard to get. You are honoring your boundaries because you know your worth, and he will meet you at that level willingly. When a woman lives this way, the entire dynamic of her relationships changes. She becomes the chooser, not the chosen. She becomes the standard, not the exception. She becomes a partner, not a project. And she becomes someone who understands that privacy is not about hiding flaws. It's about controlling access to your emotional world so that love has the structure it needs to thrive. Because true love does not require immediate access, it requires earned access. True connection is not formed through rapid transparency, it is formed through mutual consistency. A real partnership is not built on exposing everything, it is built on sharing the right things at the right time with the right person. A woman with strong boundaries creates a life where she is valued for who she is, not for how much she reveals. She attracts men who respect commitment instead of chasing immediate gratification. She inspires effort instead of encouraging entitlement. She builds relationships rooted in sincerity instead of superficial intensity. And the beautiful thing is, once these principles become part of who you are, you begin to feel a calm confidence that no relationship can take away. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you no longer need everyone to understand you. You no longer chase validation because you have validated yourself. You no longer depend on someone else's presence to feel complete because you have already built a foundation within yourself. Your privacy becomes your strength. Your boundaries become your compass. Your self-respect becomes your shield, and your energy becomes your signature, powerful, steady, and unforgettable. A woman who guards her inner world creates an outer life that reflects her worth. She stops attracting chaos and starts attracting clarity. She stops accepting crumbs and starts expecting consistency. She stops fearing abandonment and starts embracing choice. She stops settling for potential and starts valuing patterns. She stops giving men the emotional fast pass and starts honoring her pace, her peace, and her process. And in that transformation, she finally understands what it means to be a woman who is not only desired, but truly valued. A woman whose presence commands effort. A woman whose depth inspires loyalty. A woman whose mystery draws respect. A woman whose strength cannot be shaken because it comes from within, not from the approval of a man. And once you step into that version of yourself, everything in your life begins to rise to meet you. And when you step into that version of yourself, you start to experience a different kind of clarity, one that isn't loud or dramatic, but steady and undeniable. It's the clarity that comes from finally recognizing how many years you spent giving away parts of yourself without realizing you were doing it. It's the clarity that shows you how many conversations you had where you overshared because you believed openness would guarantee connection. It's the clarity that reveals how many times you hoped vulnerability would create intimacy, not realizing that vulnerability without trust is simply exposure. But now, as this new version of you emerges, you begin to see the contrast between who you were and who you are becoming. And that contrast becomes your awakening. You start noticing how differently you move through the world when you're no longer desperate to be understood. You start to appreciate the quiet power in holding something back until you know the person in front of you can hold it with care. You begin to feel more present, more grounded, and more selective, not because you've become guarded, but because you've become intentional. And that intention becomes an anchor. It keeps you calm in conversations that once made you anxious. It keeps you stable in moments that once made you spiral. It keeps you confident in situations where you once needed reassurance. Suddenly, the way you give your energy changes. You no longer pour yourself into people who offer you uncertainty. You no longer open up to men who show inconsistency. You no longer hand out emotional access to anyone simply because they asked. Instead, you let people reveal their intentions through their patterns, not their promises. You let them demonstrate reliability before you ever reveal vulnerability. You let their actions, not their charm, decide whether they get a seat at your table. And as you do this, something incredible happens. Men begin to mirror the standard you set. A man who once expected early intimacy will now put effort into earning it. A man who once used sweet words will now show real consistency. A man who once assumed his presence was enough will now understand that he must contribute something meaningful to be part of your world. Because your behavior teaches people how to treat you, and your boundaries teach them how to value you. This is the moment when you start attracting emotional adults instead of emotional tourists. You start drawing in the kind of man who isn't intimidated by your strength, but inspired by it. The kind who sees your privacy not as a wall, but as an invitation to rise. The kind who wants to know you slowly, deeply, deliberately. Because depth is something he respects, not something he fears. And he understands that the most valuable things in life never come without patience. But even beyond relationships, this transformation changes your relationship with yourself. You begin to trust your own judgment more. You stop second-guessing your worth based on someone else's ability to see it. You stop apologizing for taking your time, for being selective, for wanting emotional safety before emotional intimacy. You stop believing the lie that vulnerability must be immediate to be real. You realize that vulnerability is powerful only when it's protected. And when you look back at your past, you don't judge yourself for the times you gave too much. You see the woman you were, hopeful, loving, eager to connect, and you honor her, because without her, you wouldn't have become this version of yourself. Her mistakes were lessons. Her heartbreaks were catalysts. Her disappointments were redirections. She wasn't weak, she was learning. She wasn't naive, she was open-hearted. And now, you've taken all those experiences and turned them into wisdom. Wisdom guides you in every interaction. It tells you when someone's energy feels off. It tells you when someone's intentions don't align. It tells you when someone doesn't deserve the full story of who you are. You no longer need someone to prove you wrong about your intuition. You trust yourself now. You trust your voice, your pace, your boundaries, and that trust becomes the foundation of your entire emotional life. As you continue to protect the 5 things you've learned to keep private, you begin to experience something else, the joy of being known gradually, the excitement of revealing layers only when it feels right, the beauty of connection that unfolds naturally, not forcefully. You start to enjoy the slow build. You find meaning in the pauses. You appreciate the richness that comes from taking your time. And in that space, you create relationships that are stronger, healthier, and more fulfilling than anything you've known before. The men who enter your life now will notice that they cannot simply step in and claim you. They must show consistency. They must show patience. They must show respect. And the ones who can't will quietly fade away, not because you push them out, but because your boundaries filtered them naturally. You don't even have to lift a finger. Your energy does the work for you. Because a woman who guards her privacy with purpose radiates a different kind of confidence. A confidence that doesn't need validation. A confidence that doesn't need explanation. A confidence that isn't loud but unmistakably powerful. That is the kind of confidence that makes a man think twice before approaching you casually. It makes him understand that this is not a woman you play with. This is not a woman you date out of boredom. This is not a woman you approach without intention. This is a woman you show up for. And the best part is, this kind of confidence doesn't just change how men treat you. It changes how you treat you. You begin to show yourself more respect. You start honoring your own feelings instead of dismissing them. You stop tolerating behavior that violates your standards. You begin walking away sooner, faster, and cleaner from anyone who disrupts your peace. You stop betraying yourself just to maintain a connection. You stop dimming your light to make someone else feel brighter. You stop shrinking to be chosen. You stop sacrificing your boundaries for temporary intimacy. You realize that the woman you are becoming is too valuable to hand herself over cheaply. And that's not arrogance. It's awareness. It's owning your worth. It's finally understanding that you don't owe anyone the most sacred parts of you simply because they showed interest. Access to your inner world must be earned, not assumed. And once you internalize that truth, everything shifts. Your conversations become richer because you no longer speak from insecurity, but from clarity. Your relationships become healthier because you no longer bend your boundaries to keep someone. Your presence becomes more powerful because you no longer give your energy where it isn't reciprocated. Your decisions become easier because you no longer question whether you deserve better. You know you do. You become a woman who understands that privacy is not a barrier to connection. It is the bridge to the right connection. You become a woman who knows that love is not built on emotional exposure, but on emotional reciprocity. You become a woman who attracts partners who understand the value of patience and the responsibility of access, because a woman who honors her boundaries becomes a woman whose love is not easily won, but deeply cherished by the one who earns it. And once you embrace that fully, you realize you've stepped into a version of yourself that is unstoppable, unapologetic, and undeniably powerful.